Good morning, friends. Welcome to another episode of the Make Saints podcast. I'm Drew Downs. And this one is about what it means to be a Christian. It's not actually an episode in which I tell you what it means to be a Christian. It's that I'm talking about the idea that we would phrase what it means to be a Christian, which is to say that we think often that there is a way to be Christian, that there is a singular thing or a singular path or a singular concept that Christian speaks for everyone that is a Christian. And that is so not how it works. There is a wide diversity within the Christian faith and has been from the beginning. Most of our efforts throughout history to sort of unify or create a singular identity for the faith has only ever led to pain and discord. What ends up happening is that majorities don't just win votes, they tend to win violently. And so some of the councils of the great councils of the church in the first millennium involved literal violence in which bishops killed other bishops. One of the things we see today is the kind of violent, rhetorical violence of overthrowing traditions and the disemboweling of traditions in public by other Christians, being able to say that these people aren't real Christians. There's a philosophy, a form they call it the no true Scotsman, which is to sort of the challenge in which we argue over who gets to count as a member of a group. So in this case, who gets to count as a real Christian? And this is a debate that's not actually very good for anyone involved. Most commonly, it takes two forms in public. The most common one is when people unintentionally think they can speak for everyone. This is not always how it works in like people's minds, but it's how it works in reality. They grow up in a church thinking this is a pretty normal thing that all Christians experience, and so they can just speak to Christianity. This is what it means to be a Christian. And we see this often, particularly in evangelical circles, where there's a sense of we are the Christians, like this is what it means. And there are all these other heretics that call themselves Christians, but they don't really count. Or whatever, right? And so there's a way to just sort of speak of Christianity as if our flavor is the only flavor. So we could just talk like it is. This is also similar to what ends up happening when you reject Christianity and you find yourself talking about Christians. This is what Christians believe, right? And then you sort of create a list of things that Christians believe this. We often do this. Sometimes it's a little easier to do this with other traditions. So we say, this is what Jewish people believe. This is what Muslims believe, right? As opposed to recognizing there are diverse belief systems and different groups within our faith tradition that believe wildly different things. So that's one piece of it, right? The other version is the kind that happens when people are really quite not very good at being Christian. And we recognize this because we read the Bible or we read passages from the Bible and then we see the behavior and we're like, yeah, that's not really Christian, is it? That's not how Christians are supposed to behave. And then we find ourselves sort of kicking that group out and being able to say yeah, those aren't real Christians. We end up, it's kind of like Kainos, Christian in name only, right? And so it becomes a kind of retaliatory move. That's not any better. But I will say that the difference between these are significant, but let's just pretend they're the same for rhetorical sake. What I wanted to name is that this is all coming up because we had an interesting couple of encounters, public encounters that I think that need wrestling together, that we just need to be able to take them together and recognize what's happening because they were intentionally placed together. These were not surprising, so surprisingly placed together. The first one was a couple weeks ago when the Bishop of Washington, the Right Reverend Mary Ann Edgar Buddy, was preaching in her pulpit at the National Cathedral and did what preachers do from the pulpit, which is commend to the people who are there that they be good. And shocking that a preacher would say, hey, how about you be a decent human being? And but of course it's what we do when at a wedding, when two people are coming together to get married, we commend the two who love each other. If someone were to come in and sometimes when someone is leaving the church and they're moving somewhere else, we might commend that person and to go and take with them what they've learned here, and that they be safe and well. We do this every week in our tradition. We send people out in peace to love and serve the Lord. And we respond by saying thanks be to God. And so there is a commending. This is what we do. And so the bishop commended the president to show mercy and respect the dignity of every human being, which you probably have already heard are as an from in the Episcopal Church, that is in our baptismal covenant. So these are things that we literally promise every time someone is baptized. We affirm those promises again. So these are promises that recognizing that that the president has been married in the Episcopal Church and has baptized his children in this church. These are promises that he has no doubt made alongside the people around him. So this is just a reminder of what he is called to do. Now, of course, the response, including many Christians, was to call this nasty and wrong, and to, including one representative wanting to have her deported, which is an interesting way of referring to an American citizen, suggesting she be sent to another country that is not her own. At the same, so we had that, and then the following week we had the vice president say something. Now, I want to highlight here a lot of the language around the criticism of Bishop Buddy was that she should, quote unquote, stay in her lane. And what this does is it sort of highlights the creation of a two-way street. That there's the one lane is for politics and one lane is for religion or theology, and we'll stay in our lane and you stay in your lane and everyone is safe. You get out of the politics, which is an easy argument made to criticize anyone about when you don't actually have a means of refuting or arguing back. It's a rhetorical dead end. So that was the first week. Then the second week, the vice president did a little theology on television. He got himself in the other lane, proving, I think, that this is not actually a two-way street. This was always intended to be a one-way street, that they get to talk theology and politics, and she gets to be hated and abused. Recognize that is the dynamic. His theology got into something which is itself a little bit of an interesting digression, to be able to recognize that he is speaking from within tradition, but not of tradition. Which is to say, the teaching that he described, which was to say that the natural order of love within family is, or love in general, is that it first goes to the family and then to the extended family. And if there's anything left, it goes to our neighbors. He is able to sort of quote from within tradition some teaching around this, but it is not tradition in the capital T. It is not what is taught by the Roman Catholic Church, nor is it something that has been taught by Christianity as the proper ordering of things. It's important to recognize this distinction, that he has grounds to say this is my belief, and he has grounds to be able to claim that from within tradition, to be able to say there is traditional teaching here. But he does not have grounds to say that this is traditional and that this is how Christians are to order their lives. Recognize that difference. And also recognize, again, how this is at the macro level. Go up a level, recognize how this feels, right? So in the one sense, shut up. You don't get to talk about that. That's dangerous, that's divisive, you're awful, you're a nasty human being. And then I get to speak for everybody. Right? Recognize how these two things function within our own challenge of recognizing what's real, what's traditional, what counts, what makes a true Christian. I want to give just one sort of last bit on this, which is, of course, to recognize what it says in Scripture. So while Vice President Vance is able to hang his hat on a theologian making these claims, it is clearly not the intention of Jesus as shown in the Gospels. What is clear in the Gospels is that love of neighbor as oneself is a central commandment of the faith. So that is something that is consistent throughout time and throughout traditions, and is a consistent character that one ought to be able to argue is a Christian principle. So if we love our neighbors as ourselves, it's not a question of whether there's any leftover love after we love our personal family, our nuclear family first. It's to say, I love them as much as me. And so in that sense, that tension of having to live into loving my neighbor as much as I love myself really does mean a distinct challenge to how we operate on a daily basis. And it really challenges how we can see the love and compassion that we so often hold back from one another. Another piece that I want to highlight, of course, another Jesus thing, is that he makes reference to chosen family coming before blood family. There's a story that is consistent among the synoptics of Jesus into the face of his mother, brothers and sisters, and saying, I don't know you. These, referring to his disciples, are my family. And he throughout also has similar tensions in which he invites teachings around this stuff. One in which he tells a man who wants to bury his father who's died, go bury, let the dead bury the dead. When he talks about the divisions within families. He makes reference to coming to divide. One of the things that reasons he's saying that primarily seems to be that loving Jesus and putting love of neighbor as equal to self is not something that mothers like to hear. Mothers want your devotion, right? And you're like, no, Mom, I love Jesus. I love Jesus more than you. And Mom goes, you can't, right? What do you think is happening right there? Well, I mean, you're doing what Jesus said, but they are holding on to something that Jesus said not to hold on to, right? That's the tension. It's not an intentional division. It's not like hate your mother. It's actually like, love this. And if they can't love it too, love this anyway. That this goes above the nuclear family. This is a real challenge to that vision that was being offered of loving that way. And this is the one that I want to offer, and it's the reminder that I like to give, which is that I don't think we have a limited supply of love. We don't have a limited supply of grace. We don't have a limited supply of mercy. We see this one in the teaching when Jesus asks Peter, tells the disciples that they have to show mercy, and they just have to keep doing it. And Peter's response, which is great, is like, how about 7 times? Is that a good number? He's like, I can see forgiving someone 7 times. And Jesus' response is like, how about you multiply that by 7, and then we're getting closer to the ballpark. Which is 2 things happening there. One is the numerology around it, and it's a reference to the Jubilee year. But the real juice in it is, come on, that's a number who can keep track of 49 times that you've forgiven somebody? Like, if you were willing to write in a notebook that you have forgiven someone 48 times and you've got one more time to go, that's on you being a horrible person. Like, the point is to just keep forgiving. Like, that's what he's saying, just keep forgiving. That is a necessary part of this deal, is you have to figure out how to do that and then just keep doing it. That's on you. Like, you don't get to control them. You don't get to determine whether they themselves have gotten better to meet your satisfaction. That's not how this works. You don't get to give a Yelp review to a church service, and you don't get to give a Yelp review to someone else's effort in changing themselves to make themselves better. You get to love them. You get to love them, and you can, because the love you can share with them is love given to you by God. By God's grace on you. That's what's the centerpiece of it. So not only do I not buy that what it means to be a Christian means love in my family, and if there's anything left for other people, maybe I can love my neighbors too. It's that I have so much love available to me on demand that there is enough for me to love my neighbor, enough for me to love the immigrant, enough for me to love the stranger, enough to love the person who even wronged me. That I can love them enough to want them to get better. There is plenty of love, my friends. Let's not pretend that selfishness, narrow-mindedness, and the desire to control all of Christianity is what represents all of Christianity. Does not sound like that vision, does not sound like the faith I've ever known. And we ought to help each other hear the many, many voices within our tradition that sound a lot more like Jesus. Be well, and we'll see you next time.